Darrell Stranger here. Welcome back to another episode of APTN InFocus. We're here on location at the second annual Indigenous SHE Conference at the Fairmont Hotel in downtown Winnipeg. Now, this conference is about all things Indigenous women in business and finance. And before we get to some of the great speakers that we've got today, here's a bit of the opening of the conference.
We have an exciting role. We have a powerful responsibility, not only as leaders in the community, but also the strengths in our homes and in our families. And we've had a huge shift where the women are really stepping into their place and into their power, and the men are knowing that it's time that they kind of stepped aside and that they supported and they became those allies.
Well, I am pleased to be joined by our first guest, Carol-Ann Hilton. Carol-Ann, it's a wonderful pleasure to be speaking with you. You're the founder of the Indigenomics Institute, is that right? Am I getting that right? And so you also, I guess, started this whole conference and what it's all about. So I'm really glad to be able to speak with you and sort of pick your brain about a number of different topics, but we'll start simple. And then why did you want to start this conference?
Yes, we started Indigenomics SHE to be able to facilitate a strength-based narrative space around Indigenous women in business, the growth of Indigenous entrepreneurs, and just have this common space around leadership, innovation, impact, and just understanding how perseverance, resilience comes into play of Indigenous women in business.
So when did this whole idea sort of start, or when did you get the idea that this is something we might need and we should start working on it? So can you give us a timeline of maybe from when you first thought of it to the first conference last year?
I think I thought about it for about a year in advance, and I was kind of percolating in my brain and just like, what are the conversations that we need to have as Indigenous women in business? And that really just shaped the emerging pathway for this conference to happen, and to be able to bring space for Indigenous women in business to have a voice, and diverse voices, and voices from around the country, and to bring this realization of, if we can do it, one of us succeeds, we all succeed, and to watch this emerging realization of how significant Indigenous women in business are in terms of our home communities, our families overall.
Yeah. So was there something that prompted you to want to create this, or was it an event in your life, or was it something you just sort of thought about over time and then it just sort of culminated with, hey, let's do it?
With the Indigenomics Institute, we focus on the foundation and the narrative of a $100 billion national Indigenous economy. So the Indigenomics SHE was just, what is women's role in uplifting that, of how are we succeeding, what success looks like, what our leadership looks like, and I think that was the kind of founding concept of what we set out to do. I think that the goal is for women to build an ecosystem of common experiences, support, just this network of Indigenous women in business, and this strong foundation of success, a strength-based narrative around what perseverance and resilience looks like, and just the commonality of how much hard work, dedication goes into building a business, and how that is directly impacting our families and communities.
Mm-hmm. So can you explain a bit of that and sort of what everyone does there?
So Indigenomics, we do the foundational narrative of Indigenous economic power in this country, and how it relates to the national economy, how it relates to economic reconciliation, positive action, leadership, beliefs, and just really shifting this identity and centering Indigenous peoples as economic powerhouses. We do that through research, we do that through conferences, we do that through engaging the public sector, private sector, governments, in looking at tools and resources for modern Indigenous economic design.
So, like you mentioned, it's one of those spaces where there's more and more Indigenous people, Indigenous women overall, just getting into the business and the finance things, and that never used to be the case, right? It used to be we were, not allowed to, or that sort of thing. So, as you see this sort of evolve, Where do you see this sort of going in the future of having Indigenous women, Indigenous businesses as a whole, sort of in these spaces?
I think that what I'm seeing is that Indigenous women in business are becoming an unstoppable force, that the spaces of leading, of innovation, of impact, and really how much that's essential to a future vision of ourselves as powerful, as successful, and that very much Canadian history denied our place at the economic table, but we're rebuilding that space and we're doing it through business. And business isn't an outcome, it's a tool that I think our communities, our families, and Indigenous women are picking up and utilizing to help build our future.
Mm-hmm. And why is it important that we are in these spaces and that we do have these women, these people in these spaces? Like, why is that so important to have us in these spaces?
There was such a loud voice here at Indigenomics SHE this year, where we heard from examples like young leaders like Kim Ballantyne, the first Indigenous woman commercial pilot, the spaces that her experience of racism, exclusion, just the tremendous efforts. We heard that other, like Rihanna Marasti was talking about being an Indigenous architect and the spaces that she takes up. We heard that with Indigeno Arrows of just like this realization of how hard we have to work to be successful and how many aspects or dynamics work against us of our belonging, our space, our identity, and all of this conference agenda space is how we've succeeded in spite of that. And just to show this story of we work together, we're resourceful, we're powerful, and that narrative will continue across generations.
Why do you do what you do? Like, what's your drive? What keeps you sort of going with all of this?
To me, the concept of Indigenomics, it sounds crazy to take a word out of thin air, out of nothingness, and essentially build a career, and to facilitate with a common purpose of Indigenous peoples are economic powerhouses, and that power comes from who we are, it comes from our identity, it comes from our ways of being, and really the experience of genocide, the experience of economic displacement as Indigenous peoples is personal. So this is my response.
And just with that, I guess, how did you sort of get into this space in the first place?
I have a background in business. I've studied economics. I think I'm obsessed with economy and Indigenous ways of knowing, and it's just kind of my hobby, my life, my work. My next obsession after doing the metrics of a $100 billion Indigenous economy, to bring that to Bay Street in the fall, to go to the financial sector of this country and say it's time to pay attention to what Indigenous economic power is. I think that's one aspect. And the second is very much in my realm of awareness, is shaping that narrative of what's next after the 100 billion. What does that look like in terms of tools, investment, structures, economic reconciliation, and the uptake of the continuation of Indigenous peoples, and that how closely that's connected to our right to economy, our right to continue, our right to, undertake those ways of living and being and doing that we do on our territories.
What's it mean to you to have this conference in the first place and to see people want to be a part of it?
So it's amazing to see. Indigenomics is an invitation to come out and play, and I feel like everyone that's come out has answered that call to uplift our voices, our experiences, and it's so important to see all these people come out and just this realization of business is a tool, how do we support each other to use it, and how is it a tool for our success?
Mm-hmm. Well, you've said a lot of really great things, Caroline, and I want to thank you for sharing a bit of that information with us and for starting all of this, really. I mean, it's such a wonderful space, and we're all going to learn so much just based off of the interviews that the people we speak to. So I want to say thank you, miigwech, to you for sharing a bit of time with us. It really does mean a lot.
Thank you. What we set out to do with Indigenomics SHE was to amplify the voices of what is our experience as Indigenous women in business. How are we killing it? That's like, you know, there's difficulties, there's challenges, there's so much that we've overcome, but to come together, to support each other, to build a network, and to be able to advance this perspective of what we are doing is essential.
Well, our next guest joining us here is Emerald Skybird. Emerald, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to speak with us. I know there's a lot going on at this conference, so we do appreciate it. Now, talking a bit off camera, I learned that you were from the United States and you're up here in Canada for the first time, so welcome. What is it that you do and the company you work for?
So we're a national nonprofit in the States. We work with different tribes, tribally owned enterprises, and Native American owned businesses. So we assist these tribal nations in creating economic sustainability, access to capital, and advocacy.
What sort of got you interested in doing that and sort of getting into that sort of career?
So I've always wanted to help tribal nations and my people, and so my career I went into marketing, and in my sense of kind of creating that platform and things like that was where it went. And I met my organization when they were visiting my tribe doing work there, and they kind of recruited me to come and join them and just help. Like, my passion was not helping my tribe, but all of these tribes. And that's really what I wanted to do, and being able to do the work with them and visit all of these different nations and helping them doing groundwork and being out there was just so rewarding. And it's all of my colleagues that are just a true inspiration. And that's what led me, was seeing them and seeing them as an inspiration, and being a part of Indian country and helping is what led me to go and do that.
So then what would a typical sort of day or session or consultation with your company sort of look like? Are you able to sort of walk us through somebody who might want to use your services and sort of what that would entail?
Yeah, so like I had mentioned, we're a nonprofit, so we provide free one-day business trainings to different tribes and regions. And here we'll focus on access to capital, government procurement, contracting, and business development workshops, where sometimes it's focused on leadership, capital, economies. We have different themes in different areas of everywhere. So sometimes we'll partner with Fortune 500s like Walmart or Amazon, and sometimes we'll do business-to-business matchmaking. Sometimes we'll do roundtables. Sometimes we'll do consultations and assisting tribes get federal status of 8A minority status.
What are some of the aspects that make a successful business within the United States, and especially if it's tribal owned or Indigenous owned down in the United States?
So I think being able to really utilize the resources that are offered through government contracting, 8A status, and different areas in that sense, and really networking with each other and supporting each other in Indigenous businesses, and being very flexible and adaptable. And with Indian country and natives, we're very adaptable, and we really see that in businesses that we come across, and it's just incredible and inspiring. Every single one has an inspiring story on how they began.
Well then, looking at this conference as sort of an overall look at things, why is something like this so important, and why did you feel the need to sort of be here and sort of learn in this environment?
So I think supporting each other as natives and Indigenous people is just the main priority, but just supporting each other as Indigenous women is just on a different level. And really being in those spaces and providing sort of just being seen, of seeing other Native women who are professionals who are out there doing it, and really not constraining ourselves to borders, but really networking across borders with other Indigenous people and First Nations to the north. And I think that it's really important that we understand how to do business with one another. Just because we're separated by a border, we need to be flexible and open and understand how to do business with one another as different nations.
Well, and that sort of leads into my next question, is that you talked about the border, and there's not really a border, right? It's more of but so with that, I mean, how important is that relationship between the American Indigenous people and the Canadian Indigenous people, and sort of getting together at a place like this and learning from each other, just that whole relationship? How important truly is that?
To us, it's very important, so much so that we have a really strong relationship with the Canadian consulate in the States, so that we can keep those ties across those borders, so that we can keep those interactions and relationships. So So we keep in touch continuously with our Canadian brothers and sisters to the north so that we continuously do business with each other. And in a sense, we connect each other to the different businesses in the States and Canada. But it's really important that we focus on upholding those businesses and just that relationship, to where even in our annual conference, we have a whole system of a program where we bring in Canadian First Nations down, and a whole program of onboarding them and preparing to come to our annual conference. And we have different sessions. So we have so many people there from Canada and Alaska and Hawaii, and it really doesn't make a difference. Like, we say Native American and in the nation, but in reality, we're here working with Canadian First Nations as well. It's not just Native tribes in the South.
Where do you see the relationship sort of going between Canada and the United States across the medicine line, between Indigenous people, and how do we keep that success going, especially amongst Indigenous businesses?
So, like we had mentioned before, how we're learning about how each other do business in a legal sense of the different treaties and how what you're able and capable and allowed to do across the borders. I think with us learning about that, we're learning better how to work with each other and do business with each other on kind of just the financial level and on that side, and of like diversity and supplying each other with, supplier diversity and things like that, kind of intertribal commerce. And just even in our sense of seeing it across, we don't really see the border as well as much, but I think in my perspective, I've seen so many Indigenous women on both sides, just in the professional field, at our conferences and everything, and a majority are professional women who we work with. And it's just, I only see it getting stronger and seeing more women in the field of business.
Well, you just touched on my next question, is sort of where do you see all of this going as a whole, like it towards the future?
I think there are already so many women and in business development, economic development, and I only see more coming up, preparing, going to college, and I think it will be a women-dominated field in Indian country for Indigenous economics.
All right, we do have to step aside for one more short break. We'll have plenty more when we come back. Do you have a question or comment? Send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca. Share your voice with APTN InFocus on your favorite social media, and watch live on APTN News, YouTube, and TikTok. back to APTN InFocus. I am very pleased to be joined by our next guest, Ashley Richard. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us here today. Can you explain a little bit of what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I'm actually working on a project called the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, and that's all about building an inclusive innovation ecosystem for women entrepreneurs. And my role specifically is focused on Indigenous women entrepreneurs, so working with all the organizations to, just build this inclusivity together.
So then, if we break it down, what exactly does that entail? What's some of the work that goes into doing that?
Lots of communications, research, project management, events, strategic gatherings where organizations who support entrepreneurs will come together and we'll try to figure out what are the synergies that we have and how can we co-create instead of working in silos and advance each other's missions.
So there's definitely a lot of work that goes into that. And we were talking off camera, you also have your own consulting firm. Am I getting that right? Do you want to explain that a little?
I do, yeah. So I started my own consulting. Really, it came to me. People wanted to do projects with me, and I realized it was an opportunity. And so I'm working right now on a really interesting project with the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters of Manitoba, and we're building their Indigenous workforce development strategy.
Okay, well, very cool. So obviously a lot on your plate, and you're also emceeing this conference, so you got a lot going on here. But just when we're looking at this conference, I mean, why is this so important to have this space and to have this conference all about, business and Indigenous women in business? Why is that so important?
I think now, especially, I learned a lot from my grandmother, and when she was growing up, we didn't have all of the spaces that we have today to showcase the amazing work that Indigenous women are doing in all of these different spaces, whether it's, in mainstream finance, entrepreneurialism, and these events showcase all the awesome work that we're doing across the country, but then they also support Indigenous women-owned businesses with the marketplace, hiring them to do performances, so it really is just awesome to have this.
So what sort of led you to do what you're doing now and helping these businesses out and helping these, Indigenous women out with your consulting firm or whatever business that comes to you? What sort of led you to this?
At a very young age, my grandmother told me that my spirit name, which is Gagagekwe, means forever woman, and it means I'm going to be a powerful woman, even more powerful than her, she said. And my grandma, that's pretty big shoes to fill, actually. And so I always ask myself every day, what does it mean to be a powerful woman? And what can I do today, whether it's in my career or my personal life, that's going to help me follow that path that she gave me. So that is really the teaching that guides everything that I do. And I just want to be able to make sure I'm honoring my grandma's legacy.
Well, Ashley, I think we'll have to leave it there, but there's certainly a lot of connections being made, a lot of knowledge being shared, and we certainly appreciate you coming on and everybody who's come on. But I want to say thank you, Miigwech, to you for taking a bit of time for us, and we'll let you get back to a lot of the conference, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, our next guest joining us here is Yamila. Yamila, thank you so much for taking a few minutes here to speak with us. And we'll start really, really simple and just sort of what brings you here to this conference, and can you explain for our audience a little bit of what you do?
Awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me. So I'm really excited to be at Indigenomics. My work is in the area of financial literacy, financial education. I'm a senior marketing director with World System Builder, the National Financial Literacy Campaign, and our goal is to educate 30 million families by 2030. And that's not a small goal. And the reality is that when we look at the current situation across US, Canada, even across the world, I find that there is so much misconception, so much lack of financial literacy, but access to it as well. And in many cases, that is what keeps a lot of people in debt or paying more interest or even having limited opportunities too. And so the reason I'm here today is because I will be teaching a workshop of our Financial Foundation series. And my intention then for everyone in this conference to step out with some tangible tools that they can implement to feel more secure.
Why is this conference so important, and to have, women and Indigenous women sort of at the forefront of what this conference is all about? Why is this conference so important?
The first thing, I've never seen so many spaces like the ones that Indigenomics is creating where Indigenous women actually come together. And Indigenous women from all walks of life. I've met so many women from the foster care system that are doing well, that are role models, for example. I met women that didn't know about their Indigenous ancestry and are now reconnecting to their roots. I think if I were to summarize, it's just everybody is looking to contribute to our collective well-being. You know, the collective empowerment of Indigenous women, of women in business as well. And that is my first point, is that number one, it's so important because rarely I have seen spaces that do bring people together with that intention. So to me, that's very important because trying to be successful in business, I really struggle in my initial years to even feel like I belonged, or to even find people that could actually give me mentorship from understanding my lived experiences as well, or the challenges or the barriers that I was going to be facing in the future. You know, because a mentor is supposed to guide you. As you have somebody who has experience and they can help you prevent, the mistakes. But if they don't understand my lived experiences or the experience of women in my community, how can they guide us so that we can be successful faster? So it's so important as well, because I know that at the work, especially when it comes to Indigenous communities, especially women, matriarchs in our community, we don't make decisions just thinking about ourselves. We make decisions thinking about 7 generations down the line, our parents, our cousins, our children, even if they're even unborn. And so that means that if we can come together, say myself, the other speakers, we are building financial literacy for all the attendees. And that means that their next generations will also carry this with them. So now we're not only seeing an impact in the participants, but also in their community that surrounds them, and whoever will benefit from their knowledge and from what they're implementing after this conference.
That's really well said, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to resonate with what you just said as well. And just one more question before I let you go here. If somebody wanted to start a business, or they're thinking maybe about starting a business, what are maybe some of the foundational pieces that you would advise somebody on to maybe start taking that path?
Okay, so I'll begin by first asking people to not make the same mistake I did. So I did not have a proper financial foundation in place when I first started my business. I didn't have an emergency fund. I didn't understand concepts such as paying myself first as well. I didn't understand investment from the perspective of even putting time into growing my company. You know, I always thought investment is you throw money somewhere and your money will grow. And so there were a lot of concepts that had to do with money that I needed to really have a good grasp on so I could help my company grow, and so I could even start a business and even, be able to explain what's my value and what I deserve out of that business as well. And so my first thing I would ask people, if possible, as much as you can, is to take the time to be in a financially secure, or at least more secure position. I understand that coming from our backgrounds, you might not be able to do our friends and family round. Because maybe your friends and family don't have money either, but that's not what I mean, is that even if it takes a year to be well set up with an emergency fund, then do that first before you jump into business. The other piece is to not be afraid to ask other people that are in a similar position and that have grown in their business, how they did it, how much money they made, how they get paid, what standards they set for themselves in their business. Even if they have a team, if they're recruiting and training, how have they trained and build the systems in their company? Because I find another mistake that I did at first in my company is treat it as if I was self-employed. So I didn't understand the difference of really running a business versus being self-employed. And I will say I'm still learning. To this day, I'm still battling wanting to do everything myself. But as women, especially, we're always taking on so many roles as caregivers, as mothers, sisters, and now we're going to be a business owner. It's important we don't bring that same ownership of all the roles, and that we do understand that, yes, as a business, we do it together as a community. And that's one way that we will be able to move together and then also share the wealth with others.
Well, again, another wonderful answer there, and we'll have to leave it there. But I mean, I wish we had more time for this conversation, and I'm sure your workshop a little later, there's going to be so many wonderful things said there as well. So I want to say thank you, Miigwech, to you for taking a few minutes here for us and sharing a bit of knowledge and wisdom that you've learned. So thank you so much.
Thank you as well. Thank you so much for interviewing me. The lessons we take, whether it is about money, business, or family, lifestyle, they don't necessarily come from an institution. They can come from our lived experiences, from our aunties, from our communities.
Throughout this conversation, I really just want to share a couple stories and perspectives from my own lived perspective as an Indigenous woman entrepreneur. I know that a lot of folks here, that's kind of your area of focus. That is the group that you'd like to really have an impact on. And so I wanted to offer some insights from my perspective.
So my next guest joining me here today is Sage Lacerte. Sage, thank you so much for taking some time for us today. And we'll start really simple and just the SAGE initiative. I know we had just talked off camera about, you you've founded that. So what is the SAGE initiative?
SAGE Initiative is the first and only Indigenous Women's Impact Investment Collective in Canada. So we teach Indigenous women about impact investment, but also the foundations of finances and really learning about their own personal budgets and how they can have an impact in their community by making investments that have a social and environmental positive impact.
So when you say impact investment, what exactly does that entail or does that mean?
A lot of people ask that question, and impact investment really is having a positive environmental and social impact as well as financial returns. So it still is an investment in the way that you're getting money back, but you're also having a positive impact on Mother Earth, and you're also potentially employing community members from your First Nation, or being able to support a charity that you really love and are passionate about. So we want to make sure that all of our impacts are environmental and social.
So what led you to sort of want to do something like this?
I felt really passionate about building community wealth and making sure that Indigenous communities were reminded of their excellence, and just that we have so much community wealth within our communities, within our culture. My community is matrilineal, so I always look to women for leadership surrounding financial management. And so I wanted to create a collective where Indigenous women feel empowered in roles of leadership, being role models in their community, and being able to take the knowledge that we learn and apply it across their community so everyone else can experience that wealth as well.
Right. So how do you think we get there as a society of having more women, like you said, in these roles? So what do you think needs to happen for that?
I think opportunities like these, a lot more mentorship. What I found was that Carol Ann Hilton has been a huge mentor to me, and she's taken me under her wing, and she's brought me to many of these Indigenous conferences Indigenomics conferences across Canada, on Bay Street, in Winnipeg, in Vancouver, and I've been able to build a network and cultivate this network across Canada. And so people know who I am, people know who many of the people in this room are, and it's because we've been able to generate a lot of that representation and create our own networks and a rhizome of support multi-generationally through that mentorship.
And what are some of the benefits of a conference like this? I mean, you sort of laid it out a little bit, but what are some of the main things that people can take away from sort of a gathering like this?
A lot of it, I think, is resource sharing, making sure that we're practicing a lot of thought leadership. Indigenomics Institute informs the global context, so many Indigenous nations benefit from this work. And so being able to share from multiple contexts, because all of us are from different nations, and so being able to share our own personal perspective and worldview is really helpful in many different contexts, because this is quite new, and being able to share at such a high level, I would say, is very important. It influences the academics and higher education as well, which in turn will allow more folks to be educated in this space, and it will become more mainstream in post-secondary institutions, and then hopefully for younger kids who are in high school or grade school who want to feel represented and like their history is being acknowledged in the space.
Yeah. And if somebody wanted to think about getting into business or starting their own business, or just they might think this might be for them, what would you say, like when you were sort of starting out, what sort of helped you along the way to sort of creating your own path?
I found that building a circle of folks that I felt really safe with, that I felt were really affirming of my culture and my identity. I'm a queer person and I'm an Indigenous woman, and so feeling welcomed and comfortable in these spaces is very important, because there are a lot of folks in these spaces who are meant to gatekeep us and make us not feel comfortable. So being around Carol Ann and many of the folks in this room make me feel really safe and happy to be here.
And now that you've got your own business going, and there's also the Moosehide campaign as well, right? So sort of what keeps you going? What keeps you sort of wanting to do this?
The intersection between harm reduction in our communities, making sure that our people are safe, but also economic resilience is very important to me. And so making sure that our people are safe and treated with dignity and respect, not only in our community, but from a state level. So implementing things like the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and protecting our rights as Indigenous people, but also ensuring our economic sovereignty and our self-determination in terms of how our communities build wealth.
So we'll end it on this question, and where do you sort of see all of this going in terms of Indigenous business and Indigenous women in business and just sort of the whole overall look at things? Where do you sort of see all of this going in the future?
The point of Indigenomics and the slogan that Carol-Ann uses is let's play Indigenomics. Like, are you ready to play Indigenomics? And what that means and what I think of is referring to economic reconciliation. What I think about is economic reconciliation is when non-Indigenous people are comfortable with Indigenous people being wealthy. When non-Indigenous people are comfortable with Indigenous being wealthy is what I think economic reconciliation is. And so when we achieve that, I think that we'll be able to build frameworks that have Indigenous people in mind, because the current economic systems were not built with Indigenous people's prosperity in mind.
Well, Sage, you made a lot of really great points that I'm sure our audience is going to connect with, and I'm sure that a lot of these attendees are going to connect with. So we'll leave the interview there, but I'm sure a lot of people are going to take what you said to heart and really use a lot of what you said. So I want to say thank you, Miigwech, to you for giving us a few minutes of your time and sharing a bit of your knowledge when it comes to all this. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you. Masi Cho.
And we will take a short break here, but we'll have plenty more interviews coming up. Welcome back to APTN InFocus. So we're just going to go and jump right into our next guest here, and we're speaking with Michelle Cameron. Michelle, thank you so much for taking a few minutes of your time today and speaking with us. I'll start simple. I've been asking everybody this, and I know you have a few businesses here, so can you just sort of explain sort of what you do and what brought you here today?
Sure. My name's Michelle Cameron. I am the owner of Dreamcatcher Promotions, which is the largest Indigenous promotional company in Canada. I also own INAC, Indigenous Nations Apparel Company, and my third company just opened, which is Dreamcatcher Executive Offices, so it's a First Nation co-working space here.
And what are some of the benefits of attending a conference like this? I mean, besides the connections and maybe the tips and tricks learned along the way, but what are some of the benefits of this?
Just seeing the opportunities that are out there. Like, I always talk to youth and young entrepreneurs, like there's so much more for us out there than just the typical doctor, lawyer, teacher. You know, there's so many opportunities in the business world and leadership that, you don't get to see that unless you participate in something like this. So this is what it's really enlightening to see all the different areas that you can aspire to be.
And we'll kind of backtrack a little bit to your own personal journey here. I mean, what sort of got you started within the business realm and having your own business and businesses now?
Yeah, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur since I was probably about 12 years old. So, growing up in a community and not very well off, we were pretty poor, and I see my mom work 2 or 3 jobs at any given time, and seeing how hard she had to work just to pay the bills and to have $1 left over after her budget was done, and not really getting much out of life, and just the basics. And I wanted to provide more for my kids and more for my family, so I thought if my mom had to work 2 or 3 jobs just to pay the bills, I thought there's got to be more to life than that. So that's what inspired my entrepreneurial journey, and knew that if I wanted to do more for my family, then I had to do more, be more. So I got into business, and it just spirals from there. Like, all my children work for me, which is really great, and I love seeing them learn the business and learn what the importance of it, and especially in Indigenous communities and in it being an Indigenous business, how we're making waves and we're making change every day, right? And we're setting the bar higher and higher for others to attain and to follow through. So I think it's important that we do that every day.
Oh, absolutely. And I imagine there were some struggles along the way of especially when you first started. So can you share a bit of your journey with that, and maybe some advice for somebody who might be starting out, and they can learn a bit from your experience?
For sure. I think some of the struggles I had to battle in the beginning was I'm a mom first, so that's my first. Everything revolves around me being a mom. So to jump into business, I had to work 18-hour days because I wasn't willing to give up my day job. So I kept my day job, and so that I could pay the bills, and knew what I was getting every 2 weeks, and then started my passion, my journey as an entrepreneur in the evenings. So some of the struggles I had in the beginning was finding time, a balance, right? Finding time for my family, finding time for myself, and just being able to commit to them, and I knew I was giving up a lot in the beginning because I had to do all this to get there. Like, I missed soccer games, hockey games, football games with my kids, concerts, because I had a project that was due and I had timelines, and it got to the point where I had to decide I can't do both anymore. So it was a leap of faith, and I had to believe in myself and believe in what I was aspiring to be. So I gave up my day job and pursued my dream full time. And then I applied to First Peoples Economic Growth Fund for a loan and a grant, and then that's what started my journey. So,
well, you talked about belief, and I wanted to touch on that, and how big of an aspect is that when you're starting a business or starting anything, I guess, really, right? Is the belief that you can do it?
Yes.
Is that sort of the same thing in the economic realm, with that I can do this?
Yeah, it is. I think that's our biggest struggle, not just as a individual, but as our Indigenous people. We don't see big things for ourselves sometimes, and you have to have a strong belief in yourself and what you're trying to be and do. That's what drives you. That's your driving force, right? So you never give up on yourself. And I always tell people, my mama didn't raise a quitter, so every time times were tough for me or hard, I had to look to why am I doing this? You know what I mean? And then ground myself again. It's just every time I wanted to quit, it was my kids that pushed me. Oh, Mom, we're so proud of you. You own a business, and they're telling their friends that their mom owns a business. So it's just and then I had to sit back and think, okay, I just about gave up all of those things just to quit because it got hard. So you really, truly have to believe in what you're doing and why you're doing it, and that's what gets you through.
So then what sort of keeps you doing what you're doing right now? And you're opening up more businesses sort of as the future goes on here. So what sort of keeps you going now?
Now it's, well, obviously it's still my kids, but for me, I look at my business a little bit differently than most businesses. Every opportunity that comes across my path, I think I look at it as another creation of a job, more opportunity for our people. I'm a big supporter in hiring and supporting Indigenous and paving the way for our people, like, you know. And I tell people this is really important when I do talks. I tell people, I said, it's so important that you support an Indigenous business. And for these reasons alone, you're not just supporting that person, but you're supporting that business. That business then turns and supports and other Indigenous people. We hire Indigenous, you know, and now so we have 55 staff. So now we're supporting 55 families, and those children now can come and work in our facility in the summer months, so summer programs. So their kids are now learning the business and learning how to be in business and work with their parents, right? So it goes beyond that even. Like, so now these businesses are supporting an Indigenous company, but it's so much more than that. So now 55 families, that company, but now a successful Indigenous company, so that the community can look up to, okay, they did it. Like, look where I started. I bought a used embroidery machine. I watched YouTube videos and learned how to embroider, and I turned that into a multi-million-dollar company. So it's just like, it's possible, right? And so that's what we do it for. We do it so that people can see what's attainable.
Yeah. So then how can we get to that point where there is businesses in all of these different sectors and trades, and how do we get there?
Yeah, there's not really one solution. I think it's just going to communities. I'm the vice chair of the Indigenous Chamber of Commerce, and I always believe that we should be doing more, not just business to business, but let's see what we can do beyond that. Can we showcase to youth and high school students, you know, what opportunities are out there? And that's where really it makes change, right? Not just with the youth, but just even people, like for me, telling my story, my journey, you know, all the struggles I went through to get where I am. I had many. I have 5 children. I'm a single parent, and I do it, you know, and that's what helps people think, okay, if she did it, I can do it. You know what I mean? So we just got to change that mindset, because a lot of people don't believe in themselves and believe in that they can, what's possible, right? So
that goes back to the belief thing that we were talking about earlier, which is a huge thing, like you said. So, Michelle, I'll leave it there for now, but I want to say thank you, miigwech, to you for speaking with us. And I know you have a workshop here as well, so we'll be checking that out, and a lot of people are going to resonate with what you said, I'm sure. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, I'm now joined by Carrie Calder. And Carrie, thank you so much for taking a bit of time for us today. I know there's a lot going on at this conference here today. But first off, can you just maybe explain a bit of what you do and sort of your business and sort of what brought you here?
Absolutely, miigwech for having me. So I'm Carrie Calder. I'm the owner and founder of Nakanaga's Consulting. We are a 100% Indigenous woman-owned consulting company in Canada. We provide professional services to organizations in the way of team engagement strategies, and it was important for us to be here today because last year when Carol-Ann launched the inaugural Indigenomics SHE, we acted as a CEDAR sponsor. So to see all these Indigenous women come together, share about their business practices, and talk about economics in a way that doesn't seem to exist in the mainstream conversations was really important. This year, Nakanaga's Consulting provided a workshop called The Best Kept Secrets for Indigenous Business Building. And so we had a conversation and dialogue with other business owners to talk about some of the things to be aware of in the early days of building their business.
So why is this so important?
I think when you look around the landscape of who's having conversations about the economy in Canada, oftentimes Indigenous women and our reality and our contribution to that is left out of the conversation. So being here at Indigenomics SHE has that front and center. I think you can really see the value that we have, which is an Indigenous lens that's different than what might be looked at in other circles that are talking about the economy in Canada, valuing our contribution to wealth as health. That's a really important part of our work at Nakanaga's, and so it was an opportunity to be here with other conversations and like-minded people that are talking about this.
So when this first sort of came across, I guess maybe last year and even this year, when you sort of saw this conference was happening, what sort of went through your mind of any emotions or something like that? I mean, just to see something like this as an Indigenous woman and somebody in the business sector and Indigenomics sector, I mean, what was it like for you?
It was exciting. When I first heard what Indigenomics SHE was doing, every time I heard a new tagline or a hashtag or something that was coming out in social media, I just sat there going, yes, that's needed. It just resonated so directly, and I hadn't heard it anywhere else before. So here we are in 2023, going into 2024. It doesn't seem like it should be a new conversation, and so let's hurry up, get caught up to it already, and hop in, because these businesses are running. There's a lot of great work that's happening, and I just think that coming together like this helps showcase and bring that to the forefront.
Well, coming together in a space like this, what can somebody benefit from the conference overall? I mean, what have you benefited from the conference just over the last couple of years?
I think meeting other folks that are doing this type of work has been really affirming for the work that we do at Nakanagas Consulting. Sometimes it can be a little bit lonely in the world where you're working with various clients, various projects, doing things that start and end, but coming together here, you're actually sitting, you're taking time, you're having tea together, you're laughing together, and you're seeing that there's similar struggles, there's similar celebrations, and that really reaffirms that you're doing the right thing. And that's really important to keep that momentum going in your business or in your work. And so I think it's just that feeling of you've come to the right place.
And can you maybe talk about some of the struggles that somebody might face, especially if they're just starting out with either their own business or whatever it might be in sort of the economic stream? What are some of the struggles that people can maybe expect as they're starting out, and what kind of support is there for them?
That's a big question, and I could talk all day about it. I think one of the biggest things that we forget when people are starting their business is that there's a lot of heavy lifting administratively to start your business. So you're not just getting into launching whatever product or service you're wanting to provide as an Indigenous business, you're also running and doing that thing while putting a bunch of tools in place to actually run what you have to do. So from incorporating to marketing to financial, everything is there. So you're wearing so many different hats in a very short period of time. So the first couple of years are very heavy for doing all of those pieces. So it's really important to find your network, to find your supports, and to make sure that you're more or less going in the right direction.
What would you say to somebody who's maybe starting out and they're looking to sort of get into this sort of stream?
People start businesses to be able to do what they love. It's a passion, it's something that you value, and so know what that is to put at the forefront, but then also know how to price that. So that can be a bit of an awkward conversation, and most people are uncomfortable with it. Yesterday when we had the workshop about the best kept secrets of Indigenous business building, there was a lot of hesitation in sharing that. So know what it is that you want to price yourself at, because you are in business, it's not a hobby, so it is something that you have to have at the forefront. And then the last thing is know what you actually want to do. Once you get started into business, there can be a time where you start leading down a path of opportunities that come up in front of you, or different priorities that might happen in your community, or the government of Canada might announce something that's on the horizon. But really stick to the value of why you got into business, what it is that you want to do, because at the end of the day, you are your own boss, and so you need to do what makes you happy.
Well, what got you sort of in this stream of things? Like what sort of kicked it all off for you?
I spent years managing not-for-profit organizations. So my community is Sandpoint First Nation in northwestern Ontario, and my entire career was spent in not-for-profit organizations, and I found myself in executive director roles and as CEO. And in those roles, I found that there was so much experience in what it took to actually make that organization successful. So in those experiences, what I found in managing not-for-profit organizations in the Indigenous community was that there was a lot of operational requirements to be able to deliver your vision and mission. And so as I got further along in my career, I realized that there was a real need in the Indigenous community to have professional services that are provided by an Indigenous specific consulting company to help organizations and not-for-profits go through those organizational implementation plans. So it was a way for me to take what I had developed and learned throughout my career in school and be able to apply that to more organizations. We have Nakanagas Consulting has a team engagement program where we take not-for-profit organizations and also non-Indigenous clients through co-development strategies and help launch new programs. I think that's why I wanted to get into consulting, was to be able to offer that to more, I guess, a broader reach.
So then what keeps you sort of doing what you're doing, and what do you love about it?
What I love most about being in business as an Indigenous woman is being able to balance what my passion is and the value for work with my family obligations. So as an Indigenous woman, I have 2 young kids. They are both in school. My wife has a full-time job and is often out of town, and so I had to be able to find something that would drive me every day to do the work that I love to do, but also be able to be flexible enough to be there for my family. So we are wearing multiple hats, and that's one of them, or many of them, and so it allowed me to do that.
If you could forecast, where Indigenous women in business goes, where do you think that goes?
I think it's going to continue to grow and to lead. I think that this type of gathering like Indigenomics SHE is reminding everybody and bringing that conversation to the forefront that Indigenous women are leading businesses, we are managing our households, we are wearing all of these different hats. We just don't always talk about that, and so it's reminding folks on a really broad scale, this is what's happening, and so it can only grow from here.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of APTN InFocus. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode of APTN InFocus.